The Towers. A recent college graduate, 22-year-old me, stands in the garage, a pair of penny loafers tucked under his armpit and an undone tie draped around his neck. He slides the top box on the stack, tipping it forward and peeking inside. He shouts back into the house through the open door, "Have you seen my black socks?" He attempts his best Windsor knot, something taught to him by a patient man at church one Easter Sunday. Too far away to be heard by his mother, he walks barefoot from the garage into the kitchen. The cozy farmhouse is in the fertile Ohio Valley. It's only recently become his mother's home, as a result of years of penny pinching and prayer. It's where she lives to this day, and the minute he can get on his own feet, he promises he'll get his own place. He comes into the living room and finds his mother staring with disbelief at the television. "Mom, my black socks. I need them for my interview. Do you know which box they're in?" He may as well have been mute. She barely acknowledges he's entered the room. "Would you look at that?" she says, almost to herself. On the television, one of the enormous towers of the World Trade Center is spewing black smoke. What happened? She turns his direction with unfocused eyes. "They're saying a plane hit it." He sees a jagged hole. He sees fire, but there's no evidence of an aircraft. Wouldn't the tail be sticking out? Or is it laying in the street? Could a small private jet have caused this much damage? A plane would have to be flying way too low to crash into a building like that. How could that be an accident? "It's like something from a movie," my mother says. And she's right. It looks more like science fiction than real life. "That's crazy," 22-year-old me says. And then almost flippantly, "My black socks?" On the screen, live, with the whole world watching, someone falls. They jump. Soon others are leaping to escape the heat and smoke, bodies twisting as they plunge 1,000 feet to certain death. There's the roar of an engine, and a commercial airliner appears out of nowhere, dips its wing, and vanishes into the side of the second building. Blasts of flame erupt from all sides of the twin tower, uniting into one enormous fireball, expanding and blackening as it curls into the sky. "Oh, Lord Jesus, no!" That was intentional. No way that was an accident. He misses his job interview as he sits beside his mother, glued to the news reports. Other passenger planes are believed to be involved. Air traffic control demands all aircraft land for the first time in history. People trapped inside the buildings and passengers on the hijacked planes make heartbreaking calls to loved ones. Washington, D.C. is shut down, and the nation's leaders are filmed evacuating the Capitol. The president calls what's happening a clear act of terrorism. Another plane hits the Pentagon. We're under attack, and we don't even know who the enemy is. It might as well be coming from outer space. The television plays the second plane crashing into the building repeatedly, almost as though it were on a loop. The anchors are reporting conjecture and speculation, along with the slow crawl of actual information. Some facts being revealed will be proven as misinformation in the days and years to come. What's happening is simply unprecedented and thus unbelievable, but what happens next is impossible. The large antenna on the top of the South Tower begins to sway back and forth, and then the top floors crash straight down, consuming the rest of the building in their free fall. The windows blow out, sending paper soaring out like a macabre ticker tape parade. As though a magician has vanished the tower in a pillar of smoke, it simply disappears. A storm cloud of dust and debris tumbles and grows, rising in a billowing mass, moving down the city streets. The people of New York shriek in terror as they run for cover. The smoke leaves everyone in its wake, sputtering for air and layered with gray soot. "Those poor people," my mother says. How many? A fourth plane, one believed to be targeting the White House, crashes in a field in Pennsylvania. After discovering what was happening on the ground, a group of brave passengers fought their hijackers for control of the cockpit. Their last recorded words would become a call to action for the sleeping giant awakened this September morning. Let's roll. Watching these events unfold on his mother's television, this young man is consumed with the same outrage that must have given strength to each of those men and women who rose from their seats and wrenched the yoke out of the would-be terrorists' hands. With a pillar of destruction visible from space, the North Tower joins its sister in the footprints where they both once proudly stood. Both 110-story buildings of the World Trade Center are now reduced to a pile of twisted metal and pulverized concrete. They had defined the Manhattan skyline for almost 30 years and had become a part of the cultural landscape. At one time, they'd been the tallest buildings in the world. But on this brilliant, sunny Tuesday morning, they are a graveyard. Chilled for a second time by the day that changed both America and me forever. I say to Nicholas, there were firemen and police officers who went inside those buildings to save lives. Many of them never came out. For days, first responders worked tirelessly, breathing in toxic air and digging for survivors. A lot of them got sick with permanent respiratory diseases. I get up close and point at the destruction on the screen. If you want to know what my country does for its heroes, all you have to do is ask them. My younger self rises from the couch. He leaves the room and returns with a pair of white socks on his feet. Kissing his mother on the forehead, he heads for the front door. "Where are you going?" she asks. "Recruitment office." "Wait a minute," my mother says, a terrible realization dawning across her face. "Tell me what you're thinking." He pauses beside the door to slip on his shoes. "I can't just sit here, Mom. I have to do something." "Donate blood or give your plasma. But think about what you're doing. This is an act of war." He rushes into the room, his left heel still halfway out of his shoe. Pointing at the television, just as I had moments before, he says, "Are you trying to tell me the people that did this don't deserve payback?" My mother watches her son seethe with righteous indignation and knows this is her only chance to change his mind. "Polly, sweetie, this isn't the path God wants for you. He has bigger plans." "Good," the 22-year-old me says, returning to the front door. "Then he'll keep me alive." She's choking back tears now. "War has more than one way to kill a man." She stands and walks toward him. "When you sign those papers, you sign your life over to them. You don't even get to choose where you live. How are you going to work on your music?" That's the first thing she says that seems to have any impact. He takes pause, pulling on his jacket. "There are a lot of ways I can serve. I'll go in and find the best fit." She calls out to him as he pulls the door open and steps outside. Nicholas and I follow him, and as we do, the man we're chasing morphs. No longer in dress slacks and tie, my younger self is wearing a combat utility uniform, a 9mm pistol, and 60 pounds of equipment. The Midwestern air around us is replaced with the stale diesel smog and sulfur of Iraq. A voice cries out as shells whistle over our heads. "Medic!" I immediately break into a sprint toward the shout, my training kicking in and carrying me, even though my service ended well over a decade ago. When we arrive at the amphibious assault vehicle, it's obvious to me it's taken heavy artillery damage. The roof is burst open, and the 4 men inside were thrown out into bloody heaps. For Corpsman Squall, however, this is something new. No picture in a textbook can prepare you for the visceral horrors of war. Even the most realistic training exercise lacks the devastation of witnessing what can happen to the fragile human body. And thus, the sincere urgency or queasy sickness accompanying the mending of an actual wound are things only learned when elbow deep in the real thing. The Green Corpsman assesses the 4 wounded warily. The first man lies on his side, unmoving, making no sound. The man beside him is bleeding from countless wounds. On the other side of the AAV-7, a third man lies in dazed shock, staring down at the body parts lying on the ground around him. The last soldier's legs look like hamburger meat. His left femur protrudes through the skin of his thigh. He sits up and grips the broken bone like the horn of a saddle as he screams at those surrounding him to help. Before Corpsman Squall makes his move, 2 Marines snap out of their daze and sink tourniquets on the last soldier's torn legs. Struggling with the immense weight of his choice, the corpsman is frozen in place as confused calculations flutter behind his eyes. "Corpsman up!" one of the crouching Marines shouts. "Move your ass!" Corpsman Squall crouches over one of the shocked warriors, his first wartime patient. He asks simple questions, but the soldier is too out of it to answer. The corpsman cracks a joke, hoping to get a reaction, but is met only with a pained moan. It's obvious the man is conscious because he repeats the same phrase again and again. "I'm sorry, Mom. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The corpsman turns his attention to the man's wounded arms. Chunks are missing. A finger hangs by a thread. Pulling wads of gauze from his pack, Corpsman Squall decides to tackle each wound, one at a time. I sense Nicholas standing beside me. He seems startled by the abrupt turn we've taken. "Where are we?" "What?" I ask, trying to sound casual. "Santa doesn't come to Baghdad?" I checked my phone to remind me of the exact date. It's April 7th, 2003. We're on the banks of the Tigris River. Another very close mortar rocks the area with a deafening blast. I brace my face behind my hands, disappointed in myself for portraying such vulnerability to Nicholas. "They can't hurt you," he says, watching me with concern. "Yes, they can." "Help me out," says Corpsman Squall. He shows a nearby soldier where to apply pressure. As he carefully places an extrication collar around the man's neck, he adds, "Keep him comfortable, but don't move him. I'm worried he might have spinal trauma." Corpsman Squall covers his patient as another explosion rains dirt and concrete down on them. And then he rushes over to help the man lying on his side. He rounds the AAV-7 and finds an army medic turning the body. Kevlar slips from what's left of the soldier's head, plopping down into a pool of gore. The medic recoils, falling backward, choking on a nagging mouthful of vomit. He catches himself to keep from tumbling over. Rocking onto his backside, the medic looks down at the scarlet stains on his shaking hands. Corpsman Squall helps the medic to his feet, and I remember seeing the fear in the man's eyes. I see it now, the doubt in his ability to cope. I often wondered if this was how my own eyes had appeared at that moment, and the answer comes to me now. It is. But as I watch my younger self dig deep into his reserves to help the medic face his fear, I observe a quiet determination surging forth and battling against this self-reproach. Corpsman Squall may be afraid, ill-equipped, and in over his head, but he takes charge of the situation. "You help him," he says, pointing at the other man on this side of the AAV-7. "I'll be right over there if you need me." The medic goes into action. "All right." Corpsman Squall moves to the other 2 men. He calls for a stretcher for the stunned soldier and checks on the mangled legs of his comrade in arms. The soldier's face has grown ashen. The Marines cradling his broken body assure him he's going to make it, that he'll be okay. "Hold him still," Corpsman Squall says, his own face going pale. He administers morphine and reaches inside the man's thigh. The soldier winces and grunts as the corpsman fights for a grip on the slippery femoral artery as it retracts into his pelvis. Gunnery Sergeant Marbury pauses by the AAV-7 and shakes his head at the Army medic. "Save the medicine," he says. "He's gone." Marbury offers a nearby Marine a cardboard box. "Look for pictures and notes for their families. Scavenge the ammo, then fall back in line. We still have a job to do." I watch as the medic steps away, rubbing his stained hands together. He takes a deep breath and crouches beside the corpsman, asking, "How can I help?" "Give me a sec," Corpsman Squall says as he clamps the severed artery. Noting the defeated expression on the medic's face, he adds, "We'll need a splint. Do it textbook, nothing fancy." The two men set aside all other thoughts and focus on how their field medicine training can save the man in front of them. Truly today they have a new reverence for what's expected of them.